The morning sun painted the ocean in brilliant shades of gold and turquoise, as 19-year-old Lena Harper sliced through the waves with the precision of a blade. She was everything an Olympic swimmer should be: strong, graceful, and utterly dedicated to her craft. Her father Mark watched from the shore that morning, his eyes tracking her bright orange swim cap as it bobbed in the distance. For years, he had followed her training sessions in his boat, but recently Lena had insisted on swimming alone. She needed independence, she said. She needed to prove she could handle the solitude that came with open water swimming. Mark understood, though every protective instinct in his body screamed against it. That morning 7 years ago started like any other. Lena left the house at 5:30 sharp, her routine as predictable as the tides. She would swim from Crescent Bay Pier to Pelican's Reach, circle the old navigation buoy, and return. 4 miles of open ocean. 4 miles that she had conquered hundreds of times before. Except this time, she never came back. The search began within hours of her expected return. Coast Guard helicopters swept the waters while boats crisscrossed her usual route. Divers explored every reef and rocky outcrop where a body might have lodged. They found nothing. Not Lena, not her gear, not even a single piece of evidence to explain what had happened. The official conclusion came 2 weeks later. Tragic drowning accident. Even experienced swimmers could fall victim to the ocean's unpredictable nature. Case closed. But for Mark Harper, a father who knew his daughter better than anyone, the story was far from over. For 7 long years, he would search for the truth. And when he finally found it on an old, forgotten buoy, it would expose a murder that shocked the entire swimming world. Lena Harper had been special from the moment she first touched water. At age 4, she swam the length of the community pool without stopping. By 12, she was breaking regional records. By 16, national coaches were calling. She had that rare combination of natural talent and relentless work ethic that creates true champions. But what set her apart wasn't just her speed in the water. It was her joy. While other swimmers approached the sport with grim determination, Lena radiated happiness every time she dove in. She said the water felt like home, like the place she was meant to be. Her coach at the local swim club, an elderly woman named Patricia Chen, often said that Lena didn't swim through water so much as dance with it. She moved with an efficiency that made difficult techniques look effortless. Mark Harper had been his daughter's biggest supporter and fiercest protector. A former Navy rescue diver, he understood the ocean's dangers better than most. He had seen too many tragedies to take water safety lightly. That's why he had always accompanied Lena on her open water training sessions, following in his boat with emergency equipment, watching for signs of fatigue or trouble. Their routine was sacred. Lena would stretch on the beach while Mark prepared the boat. She would enter the water, and he would maintain a respectful distance, close enough to help if needed, but far enough to let her train properly. They had done this hundreds of times over the years, building her endurance for the grueling open water events that were her specialty. But as Lena approached her 20th birthday and her first Olympics, she began pushing for more independence. Other swimmers trained alone, she argued. The mental challenge of solitary swimming was part of the sport. She needed to know she could handle the isolation, the fatigue, the moments of doubt that came when you were alone with nothing but water and sky. Mark resisted at first, but Lena was persuasive. She proposed a compromise. She would carry a GPS tracker and an emergency beacon. She would stick to her established route, never deviating. She would check in by phone the moment she returned to shore. Reluctantly, Mark agreed. For 6 months before her disappearance, Lena trained alone, while Mark waited anxiously at home, watching her GPS signal on his computer, counting the minutes until she called to say she was safe. The morning of October 15th should have been like any other. The weather was perfect, the ocean calm, with gentle swells. Lena left the house with her usual cheerful goodbye, promising to be back in time for breakfast. Mark watched her GPS signal begin its familiar path from the pier. The signal moved steadily for the first mile, then began to slow near Pelican's Reach, which was normal. The currents were stronger there. Then, at 6:43 a.m., the signal stopped moving entirely. At first, Mark wasn't concerned. Sometimes Lena would float for a few minutes, catching her breath before the return journey. But when the signal remained stationary for 10 minutes, then 15, Mark's concern turned to alarm. He called her phone. No answer. He contacted the Coast Guard while racing to the pier in his truck. By the time Mark reached his boat, the Coast Guard had already dispatched a helicopter. He arrived at the GPS coordinates to find nothing but empty ocean. The emergency beacon, which should have been attached to Lena's suit, was never activated. Divers found her GPS tracker on the ocean floor, still attached to the ankle strap she wore. but there was no sign of Lena herself. The search that followed was one of the largest in the region's history. Professional divers, volunteer boats, naval sonar equipment, even psychics who claimed they could find her. Mark spent his entire savings hiring private search teams when the official effort was called off. He mapped every current, calculated every possible drift pattern, explored every underwater cave and crevice where a body might have lodged. Nothing. The swimming community rallied around Mark in those early days. Lena's competitors, her coaches, everyone who knew her joined the search effort. Among the most visible was Cassie Morgan, who had trained alongside Lena for 3 years. Cassie appeared on local news, tears streaming down her face, begging for information about her dear friend. She organized fundraisers for the search effort and wore a purple ribbon, Lena's favorite color, at every swimming event. The media portrayed her as the grieving friend, the fellow athlete devastated by loss. What no one knew was that Cassie's grief was a carefully constructed performance, hiding a terrible secret. Cassie Morgan had always lived in Lena's shadow. They had started training together at 17, brought in by the same Olympic development program. On paper, their times were similar, their potential equal. But in the water, Lena had something extra. Call it grace, call it instinct, call it the indefinable quality that separates the great from the good. Coaches noticed it, sponsors noticed it, the media noticed it. When journalists came to profile the Olympic hopefuls, they wanted to talk to Lena. When photographers needed a face for promotional materials, they chose Lena. When prediction articles discussed future gold medalists, they mentioned Lena. Cassie was always the afterthought, the also-ran, the other swimmer who was pretty good too. The resentment had built slowly, fed by small slights and mounting pressure. Cassie's family had mortgaged their house to pay for her training. Her parents had sacrificed everything, working multiple jobs, missing vacations, pouring every dollar into their daughter's Olympic dream. They needed her to succeed, not just for glory, but for financial survival. Prize money, sponsorships, endorsement deals. These weren't just bonuses for Cassie. They were necessities. But as long as Lena Harper existed, Cassie would always be second best. Second place doesn't get the lucrative contracts. Second place doesn't become the face of major brands. Second place doesn't pay off mortgages or justify years of sacrifice. Coach Victor Valerius understood ambition better than most. He had coached 3 Olympic champions over his 20-year career, building a reputation as someone who could take raw talent and forge it into gold. But his methods were controversial. Former athletes described training sessions that bordered on torture, psychological manipulation disguised as motivation, and a win-at-all-costs mentality that left some swimmers broken even in victory. He had been brought in to coach Cassie when her previous coach declared she had reached her potential. Valerius saw something else in her, not untapped talent, but untapped ruthlessness. Under his guidance, Cassie's times improved marginally, but her mental approach transformed completely. He taught her to view competitors not as fellow athletes, but as obstacles to be removed. The plan formed over several weeks of careful observation. Valerius had studied Lena's training routine, noting that she now swam alone, following the same predictable route every morning. He researched the currents around Pelican's reach, identifying spots where the undertow was strongest. He purchased a boat under a shell company name, paid for in cash, untraceable. Cassie initially resisted when Valerius presented his proposal, but he was persuasive, painting pictures of the future that awaited her as an Olympic champion versus the obscurity of eternal second place. He reminded her of her parents' sacrifices, their debts, their dreams resting on her shoulders. He assured her it would look like an accident. The ocean claimed swimmers all the time. No one would suspect anything. The morning of October 15th, Cassie and Valerius waited in their boat near an old navigation buoy, positioned along Lena's route, but far enough from her usual path that she wouldn't expect to encounter anyone. They watched her approach through binoculars, timing her pace, waiting for the perfect moment. When Lena drew near, Cassie entered the water, pretending to be another early morning swimmer. She called out to Lena cheerfully, suggesting they swim together for a while. Lena, always friendly, agreed. They swam side by side for several minutes, chatting about training, about the upcoming Olympic trials, about their dreams. Lena had no reason to suspect danger from someone she considered a friend. As they approached the boat, Cassie suggested they take a break, maybe share some water and energy bars Valerius had on board. Lena hesitated, not wanting to interrupt her training, but Cassie insisted, just for a few minutes. They had been training so hard they deserved a quick rest. Lena finally agreed, swimming toward the boat's ladder. That's when everything changed. As Lena reached for the ladder, Cassie grabbed her from behind, pushing her under the water. Lena struggled, confused, thinking at first it might be some kind of cruel joke, but Cassie's grip was desperate, furious, final. When Lena managed to surface, gasping and choking, Valerius was ready with a boathook, striking her head with calculated force. The blow wasn't immediately fatal, but it was enough. Dazed and disoriented, Lena couldn't fight back as they held her under. It took less than 3 minutes. 3 minutes to end a life. 3 minutes to steal a future. 3 minutes to commit a murder they believed would never be discovered. They weighted her body with anchor chains and dumped it in deep water miles from her usual route. They disposed of her GPS tracker near her last known position to make it seem like she had drowned there. They cleaned the boat meticulously, though they missed microscopic blood traces in the wood grain that would prove crucial 7 years later. Cassie returned to shore and established her alibi at the community pool, making sure multiple witnesses saw her training there. Valerius attended his previously scheduled meeting with Olympic officials, arriving only slightly late with apologies about traffic. When news of Lena's disappearance broke, they both performed their roles flawlessly. Cassie, the devastated friend. Valerius, the concerned coach offering resources for the search. Their performances were so convincing that no one suspected them for a moment. Within weeks, the official investigation concluded accidental drowning. The case was closed. With Lena gone, Cassie's path to the Olympics was clear. She qualified easily for the team, taking the spot everyone had assumed would be Lena's. Sponsors who had been considering Lena redirected their interest to Cassie, especially given the tragic narrative surrounding her friend's death. The media loved the story of a young athlete overcoming personal loss to achieve her dreams. Cassie played the part perfectly, dedicating every race to Lena's memory, wearing purple ribbons, speaking tearfully in interviews about how much she missed her friend. The swimming world embraced her as both a champion and a symbol of perseverance through tragedy. The Olympics came 6 months after Lena's death. Cassie won gold in the open water event, setting a new Olympic record. On the podium, she held up a photo of Lena, tears streaming down her face as the national anthem played. The image went viral, a touching tribute that cemented Cassie's place as not just a champion, but a beloved figure in sports. Endorsement deals followed. Major brands wanted to associate themselves with her inspiring story. Within a year, Cassie had earned more money than most swimmers see in a lifetime. She bought her parents a new house, paid off their debts, and established herself as the face of American swimming. Meanwhile, Mark Harper's life crumbled. His marriage to Sarah couldn't survive the weight of their grief. She needed to move forward, to accept that Lena was gone. Mark couldn't. He spent every free moment on the water, searching for answers. His diving business suffered as he canceled clients to pursue leads that led nowhere. Friends grew tired of his obsession, his inability to talk about anything but theories and possibilities. One by one, they drifted away. Mark didn't care. Nothing mattered except finding out what happened to Lena. He studied oceanography, learning about currents and tides with scientific precision. He interviewed fishermen about unusual catches or discoveries. He compiled weather data, boat traffic records, and witness statements into elaborate timelines and charts. 7 years passed this way. 7 years of Cassie Morgan becoming increasingly famous, writing books about overcoming adversity, speaking at motivational events, establishing a foundation in Lena's name that she used for positive publicity. 7 years of Coach Valerius producing more champions, his reputation growing, his methods unquestioned due to his success. 7 years of Mark Harper being dismissed as the tragic father who couldn't accept reality, who had been driven mad by grief. People whispered about him in town, the man who couldn't let go, who spent every morning on the water chasing ghosts. The 7th anniversary of Lena's disappearance brought an unusual drought to the region. Water levels dropped dramatically, exposing portions of the ocean floor usually hidden beneath several feet of water. Reefs became visible, sandbars emerged, and old navigation buoys, long forgotten and replaced by newer markers, stood partially exposed above the waterline. Mark noticed one such buoy during what he had planned as his final search. He had decided after 7 years that perhaps it was time to stop, time to accept what everyone else had long ago. But something about that old buoy called to him. It was positioned oddly, about a quarter mile from where Lena would have normally swum, in deeper water with stronger currents. The buoy itself was ancient, its metal frame eaten away by rust and salt, covered in barnacles and seaweed. No one had maintained it in years. As Mark approached in his boat, he felt a strange sensation. Not quite hope, but something close to it. He anchored nearby and dove down to investigate. The buoy's anchor chain descended into murky water, its links thick with marine growth. About 15 feet down, something caught his eye. A small waterproof pouch, the kind swimmers use for keys or phones, was tangled in the chain. Mark's hands shook as he worked to free the pouch from the corroded metal. The material was degraded but intact, its waterproof seal somehow holding after all these years. He surfaced and climbed back into his boat before opening it. Inside was a memory card from a digital camera. It was corroded around the edges, clearly water-damaged despite the pouch's protection. Most people would have considered it worthless, destroyed beyond recovery. But Mark knew someone who might be able to help. Ethan Chen ran a small computer repair shop in town, specializing in data recovery from damaged devices. He had helped Mark before, recovering files from a water-damaged laptop that contained photos of Lena. When Mark walked in with the memory card, Ethan could see the desperation in his eyes. "This was found in the ocean where Lena disappeared," Mark explained. "Please, I need to know what's on it." Ethan examined the card carefully. The damage was severe, but not necessarily fatal to the data. He had recovered information from worse conditions, though he made no promises. It would take time, specialized equipment, and a lot of luck. For 3 days, Ethan worked on the card using every technique he knew. He tried different recovery software, cleaned corrosion with specialized solutions, even consulted with colleagues who specialized in forensic data recovery. Mark barely left the shop, pacing in the waiting area, living on coffee and hope. On the 3rd day, Ethan called him into the back room. His expression was strange, a mixture of triumph and unease. "I recovered one video file," he said. "It's corrupted and incomplete, but you can see what's happening." He pulled up the file on his computer and hit play. The footage was grainy, jumping and stuttering from data corruption. The timestamp showed October 15th, 7 years ago, the exact date of Lena's disappearance. The camera appeared to be mounted high, possibly on a buoy or boat mast, looking down at the water. Through the damaged footage, a boat came into view. Even with the poor quality, Mark could make out 2 figures on deck. One had distinctive red hair, visible even through the pixelation. Cassie Morgan. The other was tall, thin, unmistakable in his bearing. Coach Victor Valerius. Mark's heart pounded as he leaned closer to the screen. The camera angle shifted slightly, and there she was, Lena in the water beside the boat, apparently talking to them. Her expression was hard to read through the corrupted video, but she seemed relaxed, unsuspecting. She reached for the boat's ladder, trying to climb aboard. What happened next shattered Mark's world. Cassie leaned down as if to help, then suddenly shoved Lena back into the water with violent force. Lena surfaced, clearly confused and struggling. She tried again to reach the ladder. This time Valerius moved, grabbing what looked like a boathook or pole. He struck downward with brutal efficiency. The video corrupted at that crucial moment, dissolving into digital static. When it cleared a few seconds later, Lena was gone. Only ripples remained where she had been. Cassie and Valerius stood at the rail, looking down at the water, waiting, watching. Then the file ended, too damaged to show more. Mark sat in stunned silence, unable to process what he had seen. His daughter hadn't drowned in a training accident. She had been murdered by people she trusted, people who had used her death to build their careers. Ethan had already made multiple backup copies of the file, understanding its importance immediately. "This is evidence of murder," he said quietly. "We need to take this to the police right now." But Mark's mind was already racing beyond simple justice. For 7 years, Cassie had played the grieving friend while standing on podiums that should have been Lena's. She had built an empire on a foundation of murder and lies. She deserved more than just arrest. She deserved to have her false life torn apart in the most public way possible. The police took the evidence seriously despite its condition. Detective Sarah Morgan, a veteran investigator with experience in cold cases, was assigned to lead the reopened investigation. She was methodical and thorough, understanding that the video alone might not be enough for conviction. They needed supporting evidence, witness testimony, anything that could corroborate what the damaged footage suggested. Most importantly, they needed to build their case without alerting the suspects. If Cassie and Valerius learned they were under investigation, they might flee or destroy evidence. Detective Morgan started by quietly reviewing the original investigation files. She found several inconsistencies that had been overlooked in the rush to close the case. Cassie's alibi at the community pool had witnesses, but the pool's security footage from that day had mysteriously malfunctioned. the only technical failure in years. Valerius had been at a meeting with Olympic officials, but had left early, claiming a family emergency that couldn't be verified. These weren't smoking guns, but they were cracks in carefully constructed alibis. The detective also discovered that a boat matching the one in the video had been registered to a shell company called Aqua Athletics LLC, which had connections to Valerius through his lawyer. The boat itself became a crucial lead. It had been sold days after Lena's disappearance to an unsuspecting buyer who still owned it. Detective Morgan obtained a warrant to examine it. Forensic technicians found what the killers had missed in their cleanup: microscopic blood traces in the wood grain of the deck, preserved by a coating of marine varnish applied by the new owner. DNA testing confirmed it was Lena's blood. They also found microscopic fiber evidence consistent with the type of swimsuit Lena had been wearing that day. As the investigation progressed, Detective Morgan uncovered a pattern of suspicious incidents around Valerius-coached athletes. 2 other promising swimmers who had been rivals to his athletes had suffered career-ending accidents in the years before Lena's death. One was struck by a hit-and-run driver never caught. Another suffered severe food poisoning before a crucial qualifying event, despite no one else at the restaurant getting sick. Alone, these incidents meant nothing. Together, they suggested a coach willing to eliminate competition by any means necessary. Financial records revealed additional motives. Cassie had been on the verge of losing her sponsorships before Lena's death. Her family had taken out substantial loans to fund her training, debts that would have been crushing if she hadn't succeeded. After Lena's death and Cassie's subsequent Olympic victory, those financial pressures disappeared. She had signed endorsement deals worth millions, paid off her family's debts, and established herself as one of swimming's most marketable stars. Valerius had benefited too. His coaching fees tripled after producing another Olympic champion. He had book deals, speaking engagements, and a lucrative television contract as a swimming commentator. While the police built their case, Mark watched Cassie continue her public charade. She announced her retirement from competitive swimming, planning one final race followed by a grand ceremony where she would receive a Lifetime Achievement Award from the International Swimming Federation. The event would be broadcast globally, cementing her legacy as one of the sport's greatest champions. The ceremony was scheduled, with bitter irony, for the 8th anniversary of Lena's disappearance. Cassie seemed oblivious to the timing, or perhaps she simply didn't care. Detective Morgan saw the opportunity immediately. They could arrest Cassie and Valerius quietly, but what justice would that serve? These killers had spent 7 years profiting from their crime, building false reputations on Lena's death. They deserved to have those reputations destroyed as publicly as they had been built. The detective proposed a plan that was unusual but perfectly legal. They would arrest the suspects at the gala in front of the entire swimming world. The enhanced video would be played on the venue's screens, showing everyone the truth about their supposed champions. The Swimming Federation, when informed of the plan, was horrified but cooperative. They couldn't deny the evidence, and they understood the need for the sport to publicly reject those who had betrayed its values. They agreed to help coordinate the arrest, ensuring security was in place and that the video could be played at the crucial moment. The production team was briefed on the plan, sworn to secrecy, and given a copy of the enhanced footage to integrate into their systems. The night of the gala arrived with all the pageantry the swimming world could muster. The venue was packed with athletes, coaches, sponsors, and media from around the globe. Red carpets, designer gowns, and enough cameras to document every moment. Cassie arrived wearing an elegant purple dress, Lena's favorite color, a detail that made Mark sick with rage as he watched from home. He had been invited to attend, the Federation thinking it appropriate to include Lena's father in their celebration. Mark had declined, knowing he couldn't trust himself to remain calm in the presence of his daughter's killer. The ceremony began with the usual presentations and speeches. Former champions spoke about the sport's values. Montages of great swimming moments played on massive screens. Through it all, Cassie sat in the front row, smiling and waving to cameras, playing the role of beloved champion one last time. Coach Valerius stood near the stage, pride evident on his face, as he watched his greatest success story prepare for her moment of glory. Neither of them noticed the unusual number of security personnel stationed around the venue, or the way certain officials kept checking their phones nervously. Finally, the moment arrived for Cassie to receive her Lifetime Achievement Award. She walked onto the stage to thunderous applause, the crystal trophy glinting under the lights. She stood at the podium, looking out at the audience with practiced emotion, beginning the speech she had rehearsed for weeks. She spoke about dedication and sacrifice, about the dreams that drive athletes to greatness. She talked about the coaches who had believed in her, the family that had supported her, the competitors who had pushed her to be better. Then, inevitably, she began talking about Lena. She spoke of her dear friend taken too soon, her voice catching with what seemed like genuine emotion. She described how Lena's memory had inspired every stroke, every victory, every moment of her career. She said this award belonged to both of them, that Lena's spirit had been with her at every competition. The audience was moved, some wiping away tears at this touching tribute. Cassie raised the trophy high, dedicating it to Lena's memory. That was when everything changed. The screens around the venue flickered. The montage that had been playing stopped abruptly, replaced by grainy, damaged footage that made the audience lean forward in confusion. The timestamp was visible in the corner. October 15th, 7 years ago. The date everyone in the swimming world knew. The date Lena Harper disappeared. The boat came into view through the corrupted video. Even with the poor quality, the scene was clear enough to see Cassie Morgan push someone in the water back down, clear enough to see Coach Valerius strike with vicious force, clear enough to see murder. The venue erupted in gasps, shouts, and cries of disbelief. Cassie stood frozen at the podium, her face draining of all color as she watched her crime, displayed on screens 20 feet tall. The trophy slipped from her numb fingers, shattering on the stage floor with a sound that cut through the chaos like a gunshot. The crystalline pieces scattered across the polished wood, reflecting the horrible truth playing above them. Valerius tried to run, pushing through the crowd toward the exits, but police officers were already moving. They had positioned themselves strategically before the video played, ready for this moment. Detective Morgan walked onto the stage with calm authority, her badge visible, her expression mixing grim satisfaction with professional composure. The microphone Cassie had been using was still active, carrying the detective's words throughout the venue and to the global television audience. "Cassie Morgan," she said, her voice clear and firm, "you are under arrest for the murder of Lena Harper. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The detective continued reading the rights as officers placed handcuffs on the woman who moments before had been receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award. The cameras, which had been broadcasting the ceremony live to millions around the world, captured every second of the stunning reversal. They captured Cassie's carefully constructed mask finally shattering, revealing not remorse, but fury at being caught. They captured her struggle against the handcuffs, her screams of denial that quickly turned to accusations against Valerius. They captured Valerius being arrested near the exit, his dignified coaching persona crumbling as he shouted about lawyers and lies. They captured the swimming world's golden couple exposed as killers, their 7-year performance finally over. Mark watched from home as his daughter's murderers were led away in handcuffs. He felt no joy, no satisfaction, just a hollow sense of completion. Justice had been served, but it wouldn't bring Lena back. Nothing could undo the 7 years of searching, of being dismissed as a grief-maddened father, of watching her killers prosper from their crime. But at least the truth was known. At least Lena's memory was freed from the false narrative Cassie had constructed around it. At least the world knew that Lena Harper hadn't died in a tragic accident but had been murdered by those she trusted. In the days that followed, the full story emerged through police statements and media investigations. Faced with overwhelming evidence, both Cassie and Valerius eventually confessed, though each tried to blame the other for the actual killing. Cassie claimed she had only meant to scare Lena, that Valerius had escalated to murder. Valerius insisted he thought Lena was already unconscious when he struck her, that Cassie had done the real killing. Their stories contradicted each other in crucial details, but the core truth remained. They had planned and executed the murder of Lena Harper, then built their careers on her death. The trial was swift and decisive. The video evidence, the DNA, the pattern of suspicious incidents around Valerius's athletes, and their own contradictory confessions painted a clear picture of premeditated murder. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning guilty verdicts. Cassie Morgan, Olympic champion and inspiration to millions, became Cassie Morgan, convicted murderer. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Her medals were stripped, her records expunged from official archives, her endorsement deals canceled with extreme prejudice. Every trace of her swimming career was erased, as if she had never existed in the sport. Valerius received the same sentence, his legacy as a maker of champions forever destroyed by the revelation that he had killed to create them. His former athletes distanced themselves, many revealing stories of abuse and manipulation they had been too frightened to share before. His coaching certifications were revoked, his books pulled from shelves, his name became synonymous with everything wrong in competitive sports. The investigation into his past revealed 2 more suspicious deaths that couldn't be definitively proven but cast further shadows on his already destroyed reputation. The swimming world struggled to process the revelation. How had 2 murderers operated so openly for 7 years? How had everyone been fooled by Cassie's performance of grief? How had the sport's governing bodies failed to protect Lena Harper? These questions led to systematic reforms. New safety protocols were implemented for training sessions, including mandatory buddy systems for open water swimming and GPS tracking for all athletes. Coaches underwent stricter background checks and psychological evaluations. The culture of winning at any cost faced unprecedented scrutiny. For Mark Harper, the aftermath brought a different kind of challenge. After 7 years of searching, he had to learn how to live without that driving purpose. He established the Lena Harper Foundation, dedicated to protecting young athletes from exploitation and violence. He worked with sports organizations worldwide to implement safety protocols that might prevent another tragedy. He spoke at conferences about the warning signs of abuse in coaching relationships, the dangers of unchecked ambition, and the importance of listening to those who refuse to accept easy answers. The foundation also provided support for athletes who couldn't afford proper safety equipment or coaching. Mark insisted that financial pressure should never force young athletes into dangerous situations or vulnerable positions. Every piece of safety equipment distributed, every coaching session monitored, every athlete protected, was a small victory against the forces that had taken his daughter. It wasn't the legacy Lena should have had, but it honored her memory in a meaningful way. The old navigation buoy where Mark had found the memory card was recovered and placed in the Swimming Hall of Fame. A plaque beside it tells Lena's story, not just her death, but her life, her dreams, her joy in the water. Visitors often leave purple ribbons tied to its rusted frame, genuine tributes from those who understand that the real champion never got to stand on the podium. The buoy has become a pilgrimage site of sorts for young swimmers who see in Lena's story both a warning and an inspiration. Every year on the anniversary of Lena's disappearance, swimmers around the world participate in the Lena Harper Memorial Swim. They gather at beaches, lakes, and pools, swimming 4 miles in her honor, the exact distance she was attempting on her final morning. The event raises millions for the foundation and keeps her memory alive in the most fitting way possible, through the sport she loved. Mark attends when he can, watching thousands of athletes enter the water safely, supervised, protected by the protocols her death inspired. The shattered pieces of Cassie's trophy were never cleaned up or discarded. Instead, they were incorporated into a memorial sculpture that stands at Crescent Bay Pier, where Lena began her final swim. The broken crystal catches the morning light, throwing rainbow patterns across the weathered wood of the dock, a reminder that false glory eventually shatters, but truth endures. The sculpture has become a powerful symbol in the swimming community, representing both the fragility of trust and the strength of justice. As for the memory card that revealed the truth, Mark keeps it in a safety deposit box, along with other mementos of Lena. The investigation never determined which camera it came from or who had been recording that day. Some speculate it was from a wildlife monitoring camera on the buoy. Others wonder if someone else was there that day, someone who saw what happened but was too frightened to come forward. The mystery remains unsolved, but it no longer matters. The evidence it provided was enough to deliver justice. Mark still visits the ocean regularly, but not to search anymore. He goes to remember, to feel close to Lena in the waters she loved. Sometimes he talks to her, telling her about the Foundation's work, about the young swimmers who train safely because of protocols in her name. He tells her about justice finally served, about truth finally revealed. He tells her about Cassie and Valerius spending their days in prison cells, their false glory stripped away. The ocean offers no response except its eternal rhythm, but for Mark, that's enough. The story of Lena Harper has become a cautionary tale in the sports world, studied in ethics classes and coaching certifications. It demonstrates how ambition without morality becomes monstrous, how the pressure to succeed can corrupt absolutely. It shows the importance of safety protocols, of accountability, of listening to those who refuse to accept convenient explanations. Most importantly, it proves that truth, no matter how deeply buried, eventually surfaces. Mark received thousands of letters from around the world after the truth came out. Parents thanking him for never giving up. Athletes sharing their own stories of abuse or exploitation. Coaches pledging to prioritize their athletes' safety over victory. He reads every letter, finding in them a purpose that helps fill the void left by Lena's absence. Each story of an athlete protected, each incident prevented, each life saved because of the Foundation's work is a small victory against the darkness that took his daughter. The swimming community has slowly healed from the scandal, though the scars remain. New champions have emerged, setting records and winning medals without the shadow of murder behind them. But everyone who was there that night at the gala, everyone who watched Cassie Morgan's arrest broadcast live around the world, carries that moment forever. It was more than justice. It was revelation, the complete destruction of a lie that had been accepted as truth for 7 years. Some have asked Mark if he feels the revenge was complete, if seeing Cassie and Valerius publicly destroyed brought him peace. He always gives the same.